It's a new month, which means that there's a new version of Adobe Camera Raw available for you to install. One of the things that I love most about this update in particular is that the team focused on fit and finish, making tools that we recently released, such as the Vectorscope and the Bidirectional Linear Gradient, even more useful. And I have it on good authority that we're not stopping there. Expect even more improvements to those features and several others in the coming releases. But for now, let me show you what's new in the July update of Adobe Camera Raw version 18.4.1. Let's dive in. All right, as is always the case, the first thing you're going to want to do is go to the Creative Cloud desktop app, go to apps over here, and then view updates. And you should have, as you can see here, Camera Raw 18.4.1. That has been released for about a week now, so it's definitely available. You should see an update button and click it, and you're good to go. Now, of course, Camera Raw requires a host app, so Photoshop or Adobe Bridge. If you have the photography plan, then you have access to Adobe Camera Raw. All right, so the first new feature in Camera Raw, I don't know if you'd call it a new feature. I think it's a new feature. If you go to Adobe Bridge over here and you go to About Camera Raw, you'll see there is the kind of credit roll of all of the people who work on Camera Raw. And right there is my name. And that is important because, for me at least, effective last week, I officially joined the Camera Raw team as a quality engineer. I was a quality engineer on Lightroom, and I still will very, very closely work with the Lightroom team, but I am now officially part of Camera Raw. I'm very excited about this. I got some truly, truly amazing colleagues, and yeah, we've got some very, very fun things in the works for you. So I just want to throw that out there, a bit of personal news. Okay, so let's start with a few improvements. The first one has to do with the Vectorscope. I mentioned that. Vectorscope we released in the previous version of Camera Raw 18.4. And basically what it is it's this over here, and it plots the hue and saturation of colors in your photo. With the update or the improvement here, the first thing we did was we made the Vectorscope legibility much, much greater. If you compare it to the previous version, this blob over here now is much easier to see. And also, as you increase saturation, for example, you can see how the colors that are shifting towards the edges here, they take on what the color is it's being saturated. So I think that's really cool. Also, if you look at the skin tone indicator here, we added a cone. Before it was just this line over here, but now there's a cone to make it a bit more easier to get your skin tones within the range that skin tones fall into. And of course, if you don't see that, just right click over here. You'll see there's the show skin tone indicator. If that's off, just turn it on and you'll have it there. So just overall, the usability and the legibility of the Vectorscope has gotten a lot better. Now, a new feature to Camera Raw is the ability to show the autofocus point for supported cameras. So in this case, I'm using the Sony A1 Mark II. I love this camera. If I right click on the photo, in the contextual menu, you'll see there is this option for show autofocus points. If I select it, you'll see there is the autofocus point. That is where the camera actually focused in the image. I think it's really cool. I'll jump over here. You can see there is the focus box over there as well. So if the camera is supported and you enable it, you will have that box over there. Like I said, it's just one of those things. I love that it kind of confirms that, yes, the camera focused on the bird's eye. And if you want to turn it off, just toggle it off. Now, there's also a new presentation mode, which you can access by this play button up here. So you can see I've got multiple photos over here. If I press the play button, we'll go into this presentation mode. Now, presentation mode has a few options. First, I can press the right and left arrow key to go through the photos. But the other thing that I can do is I can go ahead and I can change the background. So depending on your preference, you might want it against black. I kind of like it against white in this matte view, which you can see over here. The reason for that is because it helps me visualize if I want to print this photo. It kind of simulates a white matte around the photo. Or you can also toggle to fit to screen, which will take on more of a full screen view. And then, of course, you can arrow over and see your photos. There's also this option here to use animations, which I have on. If you turn it off when you go to the next photo, it just kind of steps over, as opposed to, again, if you have the animation, it kind of pans over. And then when you're done, you can click on the X over here to exit out of that. I'm going to go ahead and press F to enter full screen for camera raw for the rest of the video though, just because I generally like to work in full screen. All right, let's move on to the next photo. So this is another improvement to a feature that we just released in the previous version in 18.4, and that is the bidirectional linear gradient. So if we go to masking over here and you go to linear gradient, you'll see there is this checkbox for bidirectional. And so what bidirectional allows you to do is instead of creating one linear gradient and then another linear gradient and then inverting it, let's say you want to get a swatch. Now with this enabled, all I need to do is click and it creates this bidirectional gradient. So that was there before. I'm going to turn the overlay on to illustrate what's new. New though, we added these independent feather controls. You can see these two little triangles. I can make this feather either less or more just for the top, and I can make a separate one for the bottom. So if I bring this triangle or arrow all the way down, then that makes a hard edge. I can also bring it to the top to make it a very soft edge. You can see kind of the progress bar along the main stem of the bidirectional mask. And so, of course, I can independently adjust the top and the bottom, and then I can go down to, say, effects, add a little bit of dehaze to this area here, and it's only being affected there. And again, because I have this control, if I bring it to the edge, you'll see that there is this hard edge there that I don't want. But still, it gives you that control. And so everything else works as it worked previously, but this is a new feature over there to the bidirectional gradient. All right, let's move on to Gen Expand. So Gen Expand has been in Camera Raw for a while. It's been a tech preview, but we are making improvements to it in how it works. And I'll show you the basic example of how you would use Gen Expand, and then kind of a new way to use Expand, which I've been waiting for a while. So check this out. As you can see here, I took this photo, and you know, I wish I had a bit more space on the left. I wish I had a bit more space on the bottom, but I don't. Fortunately, I can fix that with Gen Expand. So let's go to the crop panel here. Before I do anything else, the first thing I want to show you is that the crop panel has been redesigned. We kind of had a little bit of house cleaning, a bit of spring cleaning in the summer, and made it. I consider it to be far superior than the previous version. But probably the most important thing that you should know is that I believe it was under geometry. There used to be a checkbox called constrain crop. That has been moved from a checkbox to this icon over here. So this icon right there, that is your constrain crop checkbox. So don't worry if you're using Camera Raw and you're familiar with that checkbox. It's right here. I would expect eventually that this redesign will flow into Lightroom, and I would also expect that in Lightroom, that constrain crop checkbox would convert to the button. So if you're watching this video, when that happens in Lightroom, I'm sure I'll create a what's new video for Lightroom. I'll remind you then, but I just want to kind of keep the reminder here as well. All right, so back to Gen Expand. I'm going to go ahead here. You can see there is this checkbox to enable expand. Once I do that, the background becomes a checkerboard, which indicates that this is all transparency. So let's go ahead. The first thing I want to show you is that when I zoom out, let's say I want this to be, I want to share this on Instagram as a story. Well, a story is a 9:16. Well, here's the cool thing now. You see here, as we start dragging around, we get these preset aspect ratios. And so what I can do here is I can adjust this until I get it to 9:16, which you could see right there. It also will update right here. Of course, you can click the drop down here and just select the aspect ratio you want. I think it's cool though, as you drag around, we now have these little tooltips that show you which aspect ratio you're hitting as you hover over it. And so you can see I said I wanted a little bit more space on the left and a little bit more space on the bottom. I'm going to go ahead here. You can also see your credit usage by clicking on this button right here because Gen Expand is now a credit bearing feature. It's only one credit for 3 variations. It's using the Firefly model. That's actually another important point. You can see here we have this model called Firefly Fill and Expand that will require a credit. You can also use content aware fill, which is a more legacy method, but this will not require credit. Content aware fill is a great method to use if you're expanding into something that has like flat, I don't know, like a flat blue sky, for example, something that's not heavily textured. Give content aware fill a try. It's faster because it's gonna just run everything locally. Also, it won't require a credit. But for me, I mean, the Firefly Fill and Expand model generally, it's gotten so good, so I just use that. Again, it's 1 credit. I'm gonna go ahead and click on Generate, and you can see right there, I mean, that's great. That first variation, happy. Let's zoom in. Um, I have 2 other variations that I can try. That one looks great too. I'll stick with that one. But of course, you can generate 3 more, or you can switch over to Content Aware Fill. Content Aware Fill will generate 1 at a time. So you can just generate what you need. But every time you click Generate More with Firefly Fill and Expand, it's 1 credit, but you'll get 3 more variations. And so when I'm done here, I'll just click on Keep. Keep will commit that. And it does a few things. I'll explain this in the next image, but the most important thing is if you go to the AI Edit status menu, you'll see we now have this new designation for certain edits that have been flattened. They will always be flattened when you use Gen Expand. Because I didn't have any AI edits applied to this photo before, you'll see that the only one that was flattened was Gen Expand. Now, you can delete this if you want. You can basically revert back to the pre-expand state by clicking on this little trash icon here. You'll see there is a warning. I'll click on remove, and then you can see we are now back in this pre-expand state. Again, all I need to do is click on generate, and that will fill that area, or you can just reset the crop altogether if you want to just back out. But let's go back to the final photo here. This is one of those things where I mentioned earlier how I've been waiting for this for a while. So let's just get out of crop so you could see the photo here. I took this photo. I was just walking around New York, and this is just common for me, like, especially with these tall buildings, as you're shooting up to them, you've got this kind of distorted geometry. And so I want to correct this. Now, if I go to crop here, under geometry, there is this icon here that'll do this kind of auto correction. When I click on it, it actually does a great job. It makes everything kind of rectilinear, it makes these straight lines straight, but it comes at the expense where I really lost a lot of that, the foreground. So let me undo this. Rather, what I would do is I'm going to use under geometry, the vertical slider here, and I'm going to adjust vertical until the building is straight in the background. So something right around here. Of course, I can use other geometry tools like the horizontal control to make it a bit more head on. But you can see it came at the expense of the composition. We now have all of this transparent area. Now, historically, what you would do is you'd probably click on the constrain crop checkbox, which again, I mentioned is over here. It's this button over here. But I don't want to do that because now when Camera Raw detects transparency in the frame, it'll automatically enable Gen Expand. We're not actually expanding. Remember in the previous photo, I did an outcrop, meaning I went into a mode where I expanded the crop box beyond the original frame of the photo. Here, what I did was I constricted the pixels within the frame, which yielded these transparencies. And now what I can do is I can fill them with Gen Expand. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Generate again. Again, this is 1 credit, so I'm going to go ahead and click on it. And there we go. We now have the corrected frame, but the original aspect ratio, the original pixels. I didn't actually have to crop in. And again, we've got 3 different variations here. So, check out the ones that you want. I think the first one was the best one for me. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Keep. Now, here's the thing. Before I applied Gen Expand, I had already applied dust removal and remove. Now, you can see here that there is this dialog that says, if you apply or if you continue with this, these 2 edits along with Gen Expand will be flattened. Now you can revert to that by using the before Generative Expand snapshot that's going to be created, or you can delete it the way I just showed you using the trash can. I'll go ahead and click on continue. Now, if I go to the AI Edit status menu, you'll see there's the flatten edits, there's dust removal, Gen Expand, and remove. Now, pretty much everything above remove in the AI Edit order of operations list will be flattened, but anything below it, including the adaptive profile, will not. And because Gen Expand sits upstream of adaptive profile, we've invalidated that. So all I really need to do is click on Update All, and that will take care of that. And like I mentioned, if you want to revert back to the pre-Gen Expand state, if you go to the try dot over here, you'll see Apply Snapshot. And there is the before generative expand snapshot. Again, I'm not going to bother clicking on this. It'll just bring me back to the before state, but it's nice that this is here in case you ever want to go back to that. But again, as you can see here, if we exit out of crop, this is a much better version of the photo for me than the one that had the kind of incorrect geometry due to the wide angle lens and my perspective relative to the buildings in the background. All right, so that's what's new in the July update of Camera Raw 18.4.1. Again, like I mentioned, the thing I like about this version update a lot is it kind of shows the ethos of the team. Where yes, we released the Vectorscope and the bidirectional gradient in the previous version, but we still had ways to make it even better. And so we put them out there in this version. And like I said, I have it on good authority that those will get even better in subsequent updates as well. Now, if you haven't seen the What's New in Camera Raw 18.4 video, that was our June update. I did a deep dive in the vector scope and the bidirectional gradient. Check that out over here, or you can see what YouTube thinks you might like. As always, a thumbs up is greatly appreciated, as is clicking on the subscribe button and the bell icon to get notified of all future videos. Thanks a lot, everyone.